Unscripted.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of PD and P-Dubs Unscripted. I'm joined by our praise team director here, Joe Latusik.
Hi, everybody.
Good to have you back, Joe. This
Yeah,
is
good
like
to be
your
with you, Pastor.
third or fourth time.
Yeah, I'm losing count now.
You
know?
might be the most recurring guest. It's probably you or Maggie's been the most recurring guest on here.
Yeah, I'm just the alternate, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's always good to have some other people. And, you know, we haven't recorded a podcast for a while, P-Dubs and myself. So, you know, we thought we could get one out here for everybody this week. And
Yeah, we were thinking or at least I was thinking we have this shared love and interest in music and particularly a certain musical era and musical time together. And so I thought we could start there and then maybe talk a little bit about contemporary Christian music and how that's manifesting in the church today and all that stuff, you know?
Yeah, because we're roughly the same age. I know I'm a few years older.
Yeah.
So high school time kind of overlapped, and we both found out we were both at the same concert, the Atari's concert at the Metro.
Yeah, that was so funny. Yeah, that we discovered that.
Yeah, who would have known years later?
Yeah, and for us too, it was this kind of unique little time in music history because punk rock has always by definition been underground stuff. Right. So there was just this little wave for a little while where it was in the public eye, and there was punk bands like Newfound Glory and the Ataris getting airtime on MTV when MTV was still a thing. You know?
And showing music videos actually.
Yeah. And it's funny because it was that was the last dying gasp of MTV and music videos, and TRL was the early 2000s.
Right.
You know?
And that's why I always laugh every once in a while. It comes up on my Instagram reels that are this day on TRL, and they'll show the top 10 videos and they show little clips. I'm like, yep, I remember all those because it was late 90s, early 2000s, right in my high school days.
100%. My brother and I would come home after school and we would watch TRL every day. And it's weird now because young people aren't connected to music in the same way, but it was a shared cultural thing. Everyone knew what the top 10 was, and it's just very different now. There's so many options now and so many ways to stream and listen to music that it's very fragmented. You know, you've got kids who don't know the artist from their other friend. You know what I mean? It's not just the old fogies anymore, as we're starting to slowly become, that are out of touch. Peers are out of touch with their peers because there's hundreds of thousands of options, right? And subgenres and
right. And then you have things like SoundCloud where people can go on so-and-so SoundCloud, oh, you don't know so-and-so?
Yeah, you don't know T-Rex 0156 exclamation point, and you're no, I've never heard of that.
And I think that's the other...
They play transient edge pop trance, and you're what is that even?
Yeah, just give me one descriptor.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing, and I know we've talked about this in off air, is the whole idea of growing up, something about buying a CD, dealing with that stupid plastic to try to get off the top, popping the CD in the CD player in the car, thinking when you're 16 you get, gotta go to Best Buy, get the new album, and okay, we're just gonna start from the beginning. I don't want to hear the single, I just want to start from the beginning, see what it's like, listen to a full album through. But now with iTunes, Spotify, and all those different things, it is all playlist driven, and I'm just gonna maybe one song by this artist or this musician, I just listen to one song instead of listening to a full album. And even
now, a lot of times, kids will be fans of a band on, say, Instagram, and they just hear choruses, right? Because, it's weird how it's truncated, because once iTunes became prevalent, the single became king. And so you could kind of be, in the moment. But now it's down to, bite-sized stuff even. A lot of bands will see, this is kind of the new model on social media, is, they'll release their single, but then all of their social media videos, it might just be the same part of the chorus or the same part of the song, but they shoot 30 different videos of it. It's here's us singing the chorus in a barn. Here's us singing the chorus in the forest. And it's just all promo driven. So it's funny. There's people now, young kids that will go to concerts to hear a band, and they really only know them from a TikTok video, and they just know a chorus. It's very bizarre.
That's crazy. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, because I think it was the 8th grade class from 2 years ago from Emmanuel. They were talking about we Last Kiss by Pearl Jam, because I guess that was trending on Instagram or TikTok.
There you go. It just becomes
And I think that's the big thing now, is you do see a lot of the younger generation seeing music maybe we listened to or previous generations where they know the song because it's in TikTok videos. Yeah. That's the shared cultural touchstone now, right? Is Reels and Instagram and TikTok and
But like, there are kids who know Michael Jordan only through the crying meme, right? So like, if you're an older person, you probably don't know what we're talking about, but like for younger people, like memes are short, bite-sized ideas. They're often comical. It's usually an image with some text. And like, there is an image of Michael Jordan who cried during an interview, during an emotional moment. And people have turned that into a meme and they write funny things underneath it. But there was a kid once where I forget where we were, what we were talking about, but we were talking about Michael Jordan and then we showed him a picture and he was like, oh, that's the crying meme guy. And it's like, no, he's not the crying meme guy.
That is the GOAT.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of ties to, like, this morning I was listening to one of the podcasts I listened to, and on Tuesdays they release a draft. And today they're doing the draft of things that make that signs of that you're getting older.
Yeah.
And they're kind of talking about, like, I don't know current pop music anymore.
Yeah.
Or I make a sound every time I get up or sit down.
Oh yeah, that's happening.
All those
for me.
like signs that you're getting older.
Yeah.
And like, the other one, two things that stood out to me is one guy's like that there's adults now that are working that weren't alive for 9/11. Oh. And I'm like, that is because that's 24 years ago.
Yeah. But I was here at Emmanuel for
9/11. Junior year of high school at Cary Grove.
Yeah.
But then the one guy's like, well, you want to know what's really crazy? Since we're halfway through 2025, we are closer to 2050 than we are 2000.
Yeah, that's weird.
I was like, that's crazy. I think we're closer to 2050 than the year 2000.
Yeah. And there's this weird thing that happens too, where like, we tend to think in terms of decades, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, whatever. But like, if you go back to 2000, there's still like the stink of the 90s all over it. So in many ways, like the 2000s don't really begin to like 2005. But this is true of each decade, right? So like it's a weird thing. Like, even though I was 8 years old in 1995, our house still very much functioned like a house in 1985, So like, part of that is starting to disappear, like especially in music, right? Like if I say like, picture like the sound of the 60s, you might imagine like some jam rock, the Beatles,
or like the Doors. I think of like Woodstock '69.
Woodstock, like there's a clear image, right? And if I say like 80s, you think of hair metal and synth and
like Depeche Mode.
Yeah,
and even like me being metal, like Metallica.
Yeah,
that's like the big four. Like
100%. But there's like clear images associated. If I ask you like, what is the sound of 2015?
I wouldn't know.
There's nothing to really say about it. And so like, that is one of the sort of the downsides of like how we consume music, that's changed, Cause
you're thinking like, I was thinking 90s. I'm like, you look very 90s with your flannel on. All you're missing
today. Yeah.
All you're missing right now is the Doc Martens.
Yeah. Which, I didn't wear today, but I often do. So like,
and that's coming back into style now, Docs.
It's funny because like style is just like this rotating door and every generation's like, we came up with it. And I'm like, cause all the, what do they call them? The Zoomers, the Gen Zers, they're into like the high socks and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's so the 90s. The high socks, especially with the stripes on it. We used to make jokes in high school that like your coach, your gym teacher, like his rank was denoted by how many stripes he had on his socks and how high they were. The higher the sock, the more stripes, the higher rank he is, And
like, because I know I've seen that like, oh, you must be a millennial if you wear like no-show socks. I'm like, that is what I prefer.
Same here. They're like, yeah, we know you're millennials. And I guess another thing is that we have wallets.
Oh, well, see, I kind of adapted. I have one of the Ridge wallets.
I've got something similar to
like
that.
One of like these types. Which, which I like.
Thin and compact. And like people have teased me forever for like having a purse or a satchel, but I don't care. Like at some point I decided like once cell phones became bigger and more ubiquitous, I was fine with just a wallet in my pocket. But then once it became wallet, keys, phone, like whatever, change and stuff, like I was like, I'm over this. That's when I started like just carrying like basically a purse. Like you got to have a place to put your stuff.
Yeah, like I've gone to this, and like Pastor and I've joked about this about like him having a Costanza wallet from Seinfeld reference, where it's just everything's in there, and you're like sitting like unbalanced.
It's not good for your spine. I guess they've done studies on this. So like sitting on that over years, like it actually changes the tilt of your spine and how you sit because you have to compensate for like 3 inches of whatever you're sitting on.
Which is crazy because like with this one now, like I keep it in my front pocket because it wouldn't be comfortable to sit on.
Yeah.
But I'm like initially I was like, well, I like that in my front pocket.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, I love it because, like, you know, you sit balance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think I have to worry about somebody stealing my wallet from me because if it's in my front pocket, I'm going to notice that a lot more.
It's nice to have that. And it's the same thing with the satchel. Like, my friends still give me crap for it, but it's one of those things. It's starting to, like, become a thing now. I'm seeing more men wearing crossbodies and whatever. So I'm going to have to find a new thing to do now that, like, it's becoming ubiquitous.
You don't want to be trendy.
Yeah, I like to zig when everyone zags kind of thing, you know? So, like, I don't have a problem with the satchel. But when people give me a hard time with it, or they're very careful to call it like a man's purse. I'm like, you can just call it a purse. It's okay. Like, by the way, like every man before 1888 carried something like this. Right. Like the jeans that you wear weren't around until the gold rush. So like
we had the fanny packs.
Yeah,
or you think of like probably like our generation, like cargo shorts. Like now that's like a full like you don't wear cargo shorts. Or I know even some of the youth are like, oh, I could tell it's you because your shorts were below your knees. I'm like, I don't like shorts really above my knees. I'm like, nobody needs to see that. I like longer shorts.
I do, as an adult, like shorts above my knee. As a kid, I wanted them really long. But I never liked, with cargo shorts, the feeling of like, once you get your keys in your wallet in one of those things, that leg is like heavy and swinging weird, and then it's open and it's like sagging the pocket. Like, it just doesn't look good. But yeah, like it is funny, those little things that are like tells of our age and generation. But like, I don't know, one of the weirder things about getting older is like, you don't perceive yourself as really getting older. So like a big thing for me, I remember one time talking to one of our high school students at our studio, and I had mentioned something about Chris Farley, and she kind of looked at me funny, and I was like, do you know who Chris Farley is? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh my God, I feel old. I'm getting old. And I was only, 25 at the time. Right. But, you know, at 25, I didn't feel that different than the 18, 19-year-old high school student in our class.
And for like us, like, to me, like, Chris Farley is one of my favorite comedians.
Yeah.
Like, his era. And that's like, you know, I was listening to something talking about SNL the other day. And they're like, you know, every generation's like, our era is the best era of SNL, Saturday Night Live. Yeah. Because I'm like, I think Saturday Night Live is horrible now.
It's been dead for like almost 3 decades.
But I'm like, I go back to like my favorite era is that 90s with like Chris Farley. Like that is like my favorite person on SNL is Chris Farley. And I mean, I love others like Phil Hartman.
That's a great era, man.
But I think of that era, but that's that time where you get into Saturday Night Live is that like, you know, 10-year-old to early teenage years, which would have been that Farley Sandler era. Yeah,
that was such a great era. And I love and appreciate, respect all those eras. Sometime after the 90s, like, SNL went into decline. Right. SNL in many ways is a testament to like nostalgia and how much we love to hang on to stuff. And like that's maybe an unkind view, but like to me, like they're only still around because people have fond feelings for the first 3 decades. Like, you know,
but maybe like the younger generations looks at like the SNL we would have loved and be like, this is stupid. There's nothing. It's not funny because it's not relevant. Yeah. But I'm like, I don't know. Matt Foley, motivational speaker. That always plays to me.
That's hard to beat, man.
Like,
that's hard to beat.
But that like difference or that feeling old, like I remember, I think it was at my first church, we were playing Apples to Apples. Okay. And one of the cars was like Danny DeVito. And the kids were like, who's Danny DeVito? Yeah. I'm like, really?
I talk about this often is that like, because all media was, you know, controlled by 4 or 5 sources, right? You had like the news, you had TV, and then you had whatever was on the radio or MTV. There was like a handful of ways that we consumed stuff. And again, it was just controlled by the entertainment industry. So like we all had a shared cultural experience. So it didn't matter that like, say, Bruce Willis was famous for moonlighting in the 70s. In the 90s when I was a kid, I knew who Bruce Willis was, even though he was a full generation removed from me. That's not true for our kids today. Like stars from just a generation ago, they have no idea. Like there are young people who have no idea who Miley Cyrus is. That's still like a new person in my mind.
Yeah, I'm like,
she's not that old, right? You know,
she's a pops. I
think she's barely 30. I don't know, but like, but because there's so many ways to consume media now, there's nothing that's forcing everyone to be looking at the same stuff at the same time. And so again, like I knew who Archie Bunker was, even though I didn't watch stuff from the 50s and 60s, but when that stuff was on in our house, I saw it. There's so many options now between Netflix and like whatever else that like, young kids, they just don't know. There's not like the 100 staple actors that are famous that everyone knows anymore. There's like 200,000 mini celebrities that are scattered between YouTube and various
and that's what I was
platforms.
Say, it's TikTok and YouTube. I was like, really? They're famous because they're on TikTok?
Yeah.
Or you're talking about like going back to the past, like, you know, I was thinking about this and I'm like, it's crazy. I think like, you know, when I was high school, you know, that would have been like 20 years probably would have been early 80s, in a sense, late 70s since I started in 99 in high school.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, go 25 years or even 30-ish. That's like Led Zeppelin time.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you go now, kids in high school, you go 20, 30 years back. That would have been like our pop punk stuff we were talking about, or like a Blink 182.
Yeah, yeah.
And like if you say to the kids now, like Newfound Glory, they'd be like, who are they? But I'm like, I still knew who Led Zeppelin was in high school because I saw people with Led Zeppelin shirts. I remember buying like a Greatest Hits Zeppelin album. And
of course. You were connected to the past that way because of the way we consumed partly. And so like even things like, oldies on the radio when we were kids, it was all 50s and 60s. So there's just stuff from 20, 30 years before us.
And it's...
which isn't that long ago. No. But now oldies is just its own genre. Oldies will always now just mean 50s and 60s. At least because like oldies is not Nirvana, that's 30 years ago now.
But it's on oldie stations now, which is just fun.
That's wild.
Or like I've seen the Instagram reels where it's like me listening to like, and maybe it's like a Tupac song, and it's all like the gangster rap that like we grew up with.
Yeah.
But then like this is how my kids hear it, and it's like a Beach Boys version style, and they're singing the Tupac, and it's like. I'm like, is that what the younger generation, or like they know them for something completely different? Like Blink 182, the kids are like, oh, I know them because I think it's Kourtney Kardashian's married to Travis.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, that's why you know them? Or like I remember a couple years ago in confirmation, we showed the clip from Wedding Singer when he's singing Grow Old With You.
Yeah, yeah.
And the kid's like, is that the guy from Bedtime Stories or Pixels or something? I was like,
yeah.
That's what you think of Adam Sandler for?
It's weird how technology is accelerating this thing that you're talking about. Cause like, so there's always been historically like a tension between the older and younger generation. It just exists. But it really became pronounced after the Industrial Revolution and technology started to speed up, because it used to be that like methods of communication didn't change for hundreds of years, right? Methods of building didn't change for hundreds of years. Once the Industrial Revolution happens and things start to accelerate, this tension between the generations starts to increasingly become every generation. The new generation thinks the older generation is old and boring, and the old people think that the younger generation are a bunch of idiots. And so this has now accelerated to where instead of it being every generational, which used to be like 20, 40 years, now it's like intergenerational. You will see micro trends within it's a generation. And so something that was just like cool 5 years ago is now being treated, you know what I mean? It's being treated like the thing that was 20 years. It's shrunk because things change so fast. So I wonder, like, when we hit a singularity point where, like, you know what I mean? Like, things just change so rapidly that I think we're almost there. We're like, you just can't keep up with anything. And so...
Because, like, everybody's
out of touch then.
And everybody has their own platforms now. Because, like, you think about, like, my college years, probably your high school, like, having a Zanga or a MySpace, which was, like, the first kind of, in a sense, forms of social media.
Yeah.
Where even, like, Facebook, you had to have a college email with the edu at the end.
Right.
But now anybody can have it, so you have your own platform, so you can do whatever, and
now kids think of it as like the old people app,
right?
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, I'm like, that was the hip thing in college.
Well, because like we were the college age students that got on there, and
right
then
away.
And then once they got rid of the email barrier, everybody got on. And then parents started to notice, like, if I want to see pictures of my grandkids and get invited to the picnic, I should take a look at this face page thing.
Right.
Because that's what, my niece is always telling me about. And then so all of the older generation got on Facebook as like their attempt to get online. And so now what's funny is all of the young people have left that platform. And now it's just old people getting tricked by like meme posters thinking like that this is real news. Like how often you see an older person like repost something that's clearly satire or something, and they think it's real.
Like I see sometimes like, is that really true? I'm like, it can't be. Let me Google it.
Yeah.
And yeah, because like I think of like then like Twitter. It seems like that's maybe like mid-20s. That was kind of big for those that were in mid-20s. Like when I first started in ministry in 2011 at my first church.
Yeah.
And then even in that, you had like Vine and Musical.ly.
Yeah.
And those have kind of faded, but they kind of were the gateway into like the TikTok generation and even like Instagram.
Yeah, 100%.
And then Instagram stole from like TikTok and that to bring in the Reels, where that became more important.
Yeah, just flat out stealing. They're like, we couldn't buy you, so we're
just create our own thing.
We'll just rip you off. Yeah.
So you just see that like this change of those generations, and it's so quick, and like, you have so much more easier access to create your own platform. Like you think about 30 years ago, would you have something on your computer like GarageBand where you could create your own music?
Yeah.
Or like the accessibility you have like a cell phone where you can make your own videos and have video editing programs. I mean, like iMovie, that's a pretty good quality.
Yeah.
And if you want to pay a little bit more, you can get Final Cut, which is very movie quality editing software.
Oh, it's one of the industry standards. You know, there's entire movie studios that use Final Cut as an editing tool for sure. Yeah.
So like, you know, years prior, that would have been like only the top movie studios had that quality.
Yeah.
And so now you have all this access to create your own thing.
Yeah.
And this rapid changing. And you see that even, you know, bringing it back to the church, like you see that differently, like what people are looking for in like worship and in their thing. Like, you know, you have that seeker generation.
Yeah.
You had that era when like the dramas and skits were like, that's what people wanted, like that church drama.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's in the same way like the nostalgia thing for the SNL. We want to see what we want to see because we want to see it and we're attached to it. And like that's part of just being alive and being human. But like, you know, look at like even, you know, like a traditional service today, all the elements of a traditional service that we love and respect and value. Those are 17th, 18th century creations. They're relative, like the organ wasn't prevalent in the church until something like the 16th, somewhere between the 16th and 18th century. You know, but before that, it was polyphonic chanting, and before that, it was monophonic chanting. So, like, monophonic chanting is like Gregorian chanting. It tends to be like a tone, a simple melody, right? And it was usually restricted to like the choir. You know, polyphonic was a big deal because now you have multiple different types of notes overlapping, and you have choirs are operating in a different way. But like each one of these things was an upset for the generation before, you know?
Right.
People were astounded, you know, when the harpsichord was replaced by the piano or, you know.
Right.
So yeah, it's the same thing that we're dealing with today when people like, they prefer one element but not a newer one. This has been going on since the beginning of the church, you know.
And like, and to me, like, you know, you look back to Acts chapter 2, which we say is like the start of the church with Pentecost. You look at it's like Acts 2:40 through like the end, like 45, where it's like, you know, they did 4 things. They dedicated themselves to the teaching of like the apostles, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer. I'm like, you know, in a sense, we still have those 4 things in our worship experience, so to speak, because you have the message, you have breaking of bread with communion, you have fellowship, whether it's after, but you have that time of fellowship, and you have that time of prayer. Those are the 4 things that they centered the church around there in Acts chapter 2, and we still have those to me as the core part, but how you accomplish those things look differently.
Yeah, and like, and I get that people can bristle at changing things because you don't, you know, it's like the church should be influencing society. Society shouldn't be influencing the church. And I get that to an extent, but like, it's just understanding like part of it is like just how people relate to their environment. And if it's not compromising the integrity of Christ's teaching, then like, so for instance, like the traditional garb that we wear, the banners and flags, that was all after, you know, Constantine legalized Christianity, and to legitimize in the eyes of the public, they took all of their dressing cues from the sort of royal militant way that kings processed in. And so it was to signal that like this is a dignified place of worship. And so like we love that now, but like that once was not the case, right? So like so just understanding that, like, you know, it's fine. It's okay that the robe became the suit, and then the suit became someone up there in jeans and a t-shirt. That's actually okay. That's just fine.
Right, and you know, and different things change over time, but it's like in the different interests, you know, like I brought up like the dramas and stuff. Like people love that, or like the skits, and I think to like the National Youth Gathering, you know, it's our church body's gathering of like 20,000, 25,000 youth every 3 years. And like what stood out to me last time in 2022 in Houston was like the dramas kind of skits they did during the mass worship time. The kids were like, this is really cheesy, or like, I don't get the point of this.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, we've kind of shifted to where now, like I would say the younger generation, I think even general, all people, but especially the younger, is they want that authenticity and that vulnerability. Like, hey, here's my struggles, or hey, this is a hardship.
Yeah. People just want reality because part of our world, and I think part of it is like because of electronics and entertainment so easy to access, there's a really plastic kind of veneer over everything,
and it's easy to escape from what's going on.
Yeah. And so there is like a lack of reality in our day-to-day reality now, which is weird. Right. You know, it's kind of like I call it like the sitcom effect. Like, you know how like sitcoms, like, you know, I love a show like Friends or something, but it's like conflict resolution. Like, and that is always the thing. And like our brains love that, but like that's rarely how it works in real life. You got a conflict with a friend. Sometimes it plays out over weeks, months, years.
Right. It's not wrapped up in 22 minutes.
And everyone learns their lesson and is like high fives at the end in slow motion, you know?
And because life isn't always wrapped up. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why I like the movie La La Land a lot. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I haven't, but my wife has.
But like, it's Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling, they fall in love, date, and then they end up kind of breaking up because of like different life goals, so to speak.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they see each other, and it goes into this like fast forwarding like through their life where they're together, married, happy, kids, and then it snaps out of that, and you see that they're actually not together. She married somebody else, and he's doing his music thing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I think I'd really like that ending because it's not a happy ending for what you expect, but I'm like, that's probably more realistic.
Yeah.
It's more real world, actually.
Yeah, that's where like, like really good high art is like actually important for the world. And like, don't get me wrong, like the casual novelty art, that's fine too. Like there's nothing actually wrong with that.
There's a place for like watching a Friends or
yeah. Like not everything has to be like a Miyazaki like perfect storytelling masterpiece. Although I am a big Miyazaki fan. Like that's like emotionally heavy to like be consuming stuff like that all the time. But yeah, like we have such access to kind of like popcorn entertainment now. Right. And there again so much, especially with influencers, there's like the influencer speak and the up talk, and like it's very just like, this is not how people talk. Right. I know this is not how people talk.
Yeah, and I guess I just don't get that influencer culture because I'm like, I don't care what they enjoy. Like, I look at like my favorite bands or like actors or movies. I'm like, I don't care if they say, oh, you need to buy this product. I'm like, yeah, I don't care.
Whatever. Yeah.
Like the only thing like, and I know we've talked about this, is like growing up when you look through, when you actually got a book with your CD, like the little book jacket, oh, they're thinking this band or this band. Oh, I might check that band out because they're friends.
Yeah.
But you don't have that. It's like that maybe be, I guess, influencer culture, but it's not like it is now where it's like, oh, well, so-and-so did this, or they wore this, or said this, or like this, so now I got to go get this.
Yeah, I think you and I were like the last generation to witness a music scene. There are, I guess, you can make arguments that there's still music scenes. I guess technically, there's little like, but like the way I would describe a scene for someone who's not like familiar with that terminology is like, Seattle in the 90s was a scene. Like, not only was grunge born there, but a whole new thing was happening musically there.
And it didn't just affect music, it was style of clothes.
Yeah, it affected culture, it affected everything. And so we were the last generation to sort of see that. Our scene in the late 90s, early 2000s, the indie pop punk scene that grew into what it grew into in the early 2000s, so much of it was Midwestern focused. Like, I think we talked about this, like I played more gigs at the VA Hall at Knights of Columbus, than maybe any other venue, but like, so many bands came out of that, like Fall Out Boy, which is now like an old band, and right? And so, yeah, but I really do feel like we were probably the last generation to see that, just because of how music consumption has changed. I wonder, at some point, like we're just, like I was saying, we're gonna hit like a singularity, or some point where like I can already see young people starting to do things like the next cool thing is going to be to like ditch your smartphone and social media. Right. Because like young people are always trying to like define themselves in opposition to the current trend, and like the current trend is like to be completely absorbed in your phone and social media. So I think we're going to see like in the next generation a resistance towards technology, and like this, it will become novel to be like, hey, let's all get in a room and listen to the same band together. Like that will become a novel thing. I think that's why podcasts have gotten so popular. Like people just want to hear two people talk. I don't need Jimmy Fallon with like 60 minutes of ads. Right. You know what I mean?
And even with that, like, because if you do listen to on Apple Music or even Amazon or like Spotify, whatever, a lot of times, those podcasts will say, well, here's an ad from our sponsor. They still put it in, not as much as you see in TV.
Yeah.
But that's also like some of the podcasts, like Part of My Takes, one of the main ones I listen to. I prefer Apple Podcasts just because that's what's native to an iPhone. Yeah. But I listen to them on Amazon Music because they have a deal, Barstool Sports, with Amazon that their podcasts don't have any ads.
Oh, nice.
So I'm like, I'd much rather listen to this so I'm not skipping the ads if I'm able to. And I can just listen to it straight through. Yeah. But I think they're talking about, and even going back to that authenticity, people looking at church with podcasts, like, well, I love Part of My Take. It's two guys roughly my age talking sports. Like I would probably talk with my friends. Yeah, and you just feel like you're invited into that conversation. Yes. And that's why I think draws people into podcasts. Because I feel like this conversation is just you and I having a conversation.
Talking. Yeah. This is like the conversation we would have in the hallway or something.
Right. And it's a natural flow. It's not like, we had kind of maybe here's an idea of where we're going to go. Yeah. But we're just kind of bouncing off each other. And like you say something, oh, I'm going to take it this way. Or I say something.
Sure.
And that's what people, I think, are looking for.
Yeah. And even if you had something more structured, like here's our podcast, we hit these segments, we generated some topics we want to talk about, you can still do it in a way where like it's conversational like this. Part of what happened is airtime became so precious as TV ownership and viewership went up throughout the 50s and 60s. Like you couldn't have the late night talk thing anymore without having to capitalize on that space because of advertisers. So like, I'm totally fine with the notion that like advertisers can have some space, or whatever. But the airtime became so precious that it became like, well, we need a company man who's never going to say anything unapproved by the company.
Right.
And so talk shows then vanished. They became what they are today. They're like these plastic, like talent shows. There's these quasi weird like game shows where like someone comes on to promote their album or new movie or new TV show. They play a weird game with Jimmy Fallon for 2 minutes so they can get their social media clips.
Right.
And then the rest of it is literally just advertisement. And so, so it's just a promo mill. So that's what I'm saying is like, you could still do like a traditional, like whatever show and have segments and be organized that way. But like, if you do it like real human beings, then suddenly it's compelling, you know?
Right. And that's where like, you know, like I've seen Jeff, Jeff Garland.
Oh, okay.
Like who was in the Goldbergs and Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And I remember when he got fired from Goldbergs, he was talking about pretty much how he enjoys actually doing Curb better because in Goldbergs there's a script. He's got to follow word for word. In Curb, Larry David's like, okay, here's the scene. This is where we need to get from point A to point B. You actors, you just make it get to that, do that. It's all ad-libbed.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, I think that's probably part of the draw of Curb because it is a more natural.
You can feel it.
You can feel it instead of like, you know, as you're talking about, like a sitcom, you're like, oh, here's this scene. Like I think of like Saved by the Bell as like the perfect example of like, you know exactly how it's going to go, what they're going to say.
Yeah, 100%.
But in like an unscripted, in a sense, like Curb, you don't know. You know they're getting to a point in the scene. I mean, that's even the point of like our podcast being called Unscripted.
Yeah, yeah.
Like we're just going to have a theme for an episode and just see where the conversation leads.
Yeah, instead of, you know, reading from a script, right? That's why like Big Bang Theory I could never really get into. It was kind of after my time, but like when I hear it on in the background, it suffers from this thing that a lot of writing does, which is like the writers are aware that they're being clever. And so you can hear their back padding in the writing. It's like self-congratulating. It's so clever. And nobody talks like that. And so like, I get it. That was a huge show. A lot of people loved it. But every time I hear it, it's just like cringy sitcom writing. It's
and
just like,
then you had the laugh tracks on it. Cause like I remember in like my faith and pop culture class with the kids, sometimes I've shown shows where there's a laugh track and they're like, that is so distracting. I'm like, I guess being a child of the 90s, I don't even really notice the laugh track.
Yeah, live audience was like a big thing.
Right. I mean, you look at Cheers, where they had to tell the audience to be too quiet during it because it was too loud.
Yeah. Yeah, totally different now, right? Yeah. Big changes. But and how all this stuff applies to churches are interesting because we have to navigate it with music. We have to navigate with social media. We just have to navigate this like changing world and like not compromise the values of the church. And so it's just like an interesting line to straddle.
And even giving that like the message of like what are, you know, speaking to what people want to hear about.
Yeah.
And being that authentic and vulnerable. And it's also like as a pastor being like, what do I really want to go? How in depth do I want to go with that?
Oh, yeah.
Where people are like, oh, the pastor is that horrible of a sinner?
Right.
Well, let's go within reason here of what I'm going to share. Like,
yeah.
But it is like, you know, they talk about this in the seminary, like you live your life in a fishbowl. And like, maybe I do add to it by talking about things like, you know, when we had our Amplio retreat or even when I do with the youth, like tell one thing people don't know about you. Like, that's almost hard for me as a pastor in front of our like Emmanuel people. Cause I'm like, I feel I share a decent amount.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'm always very mindful about with preaching is not saying, you are a bunch of sinners, or, you know, you need to do this. Like, use like I or we. So it's not like I'm talking at you, condemning you, but including myself in that.
100%. And there's like a hierarchy of what people find to be like noble sins, you know? So like if you are like a recovered addict or like something like that, that might be considered like a noble sin. But if you're to confess to the congregation, like, I don't know, I've got a problem with narcissism. I make everything about me.
Right.
That's not a pretty one. And so like almost nobody's ever going to say the unpretty ones.
Right. But even like if it deals with certain people, like to keep them separate, like, you know, that's something, you know, my dad's giving me a hard time at times. Like, I didn't give you permission to share that story. I'm like, sorry, you know, that's a part of being, and I've seen that shirt, like, I'm a pastor, what you say will be used in a sermon or something.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's like comedians and pastors suffer from that same thing. I hear that all the time with the spouses of comedians who are like, I was not expecting our argument to become a punchline.
Right. So even that, like, I would want to be mindful of protecting people in my life, like that. Okay, that conversation or that thing that's going to stay behind the scenes, so to speak, not be brought up in a sermon. Yeah,
that having discretion around that stuff, discernment is, I'm sure a tightrope you got to walk all the time, Yeah.
So thank you for joining here, Joe, today. And
yeah, absolutely, brother. It was great to see you and visit again, and we'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody, and God's blessings.
Peace.